This is going to be gold dust. Sorry for interrupting there, Dave, but this is really useful for many other groups who are going to come afterwards. Okay.
That's okay. So yes, so a year has been the time scale. We started with, I guess, as many people have done, a founding group.
So a year was the time scale from when you came together and when you got the CIO approved. Okay.
Yep. From the and probably not far off, almost exactly a year. So it took us a while to work through our founding group and decide on our legal structure. We decided on a CIO with membership, mainly because that's what Guildford did, and we just thought, well, if they've done that, that sounds like a good way forward, and I trust Ben. I may be misguided in that, but there you go. And then we identified a group as we were getting into the sort of formality of it. We identified out of that group, and we invited some others to be the initial group of trustees. So I guess that sort of initial process of sort of working out roughly what we were doing and how we were doing it, that took us till about the February, the end of February probably. And then from the end of February till the beginning, so that would be March and April, essentially, we set ourselves the specific target of writing our, formalizing our CIO documentation, formalizing our business plan, and formalizing our application with the idea of getting it in by the beginning of May, which is what we did. So the CIO document, I didn't find too hard to do. Now, I will put this into context. I used to be a research academic, and I have applied for funding in the range of millions of pounds. So I put that into context, that I am familiar with funding processes and that sort of thing. So that's a sort of a caveat in all of this. So the CIO bit I felt was pretty straightforward. There's very good, the Charity Commission documents are that they give you as the model documents, I found very easy to work with. Very useful. I went all the guidance notes on the side. They explain exactly what you need to do, what options are available to you as a CIO. And I pretty much worked through all those with one of our other trustees. And I found that process relatively straightforward, but do pay attention to those notes all down the left-hand side of that document. So you can get this from the Charity Commission site. It's got model constitutions for all the various ways of doing it, and it's got really good guidance notes down there, which tell you which things to have or not have, and it actually makes recommendations that in most cases what you need to have. So that bit of it I found reasonably straightforward. We, on the back of all the discussions we had between November and February, all of our ideas and thoughts, that was what we used to form our application to the Charity Commission and our business plan. Now, we took a little bit of advice from, I think it's Southwest Surrey Volunteer Action, where Rob Holt is. You'll probably know Phoenix. Rob Holt or Ian Holt, I can't remember now. But they gave us a little bit of input on that, but there wasn't much. We felt we did a pretty good job. Now, we separated it out. We decided with the application itself, with a little bit of advice, that we would keep that, we would clearly outline all the particular things, all the different types of things we were doing, such as workshops and fundraisers and things like that. But we didn't in the application spend much time talking about the detail of any of the content of any of those elements. So although we talked about doing workshops and we talked about having seminars, we talked about presentations, we didn't talk very much about the specifics of it, other than it would be in the context of our overall purpose, which was within it's the climate one, isn't it? The environmental one, I can't remember which one it is now, that we all have to go to pretty much. So that was all pretty straightforward to do. And I think that document is on in the Google Docs there. Then the business plan, what the business plan did was that sort of fleshed out some of those things and highlighted particular things we would do. We'd do a workshop on this, we'd grow some plants here and all of that sort of stuff. And that's how we saw the two documents going hand in hand with one another. So one informed the other. was the idea, and that really comes from my background of putting documentation together in the past. We did a costing for our business plan as well. I have to be frank and say that we put a lot of effort into meticulously getting the application exactly how we wanted it. We put a little bit less effort into the business plan in terms of thinking about what we were saying and in terms of the costings. And that was to some extent based on advice received. The business plan, the impression we were given was the application was the key document. The business plan was sort of a supporting document that went along with that. So we did it, and we did it. I think we did it reasonably well, but we probably didn't think about the implications of the business plan as much in terms of what we were saying, as much as we did the implications in the actual application form itself. So we put all that together, and that all went in as we planned on the 4th of May. So at that point, I'll pause and take any questions.
Okay, may the 4th be with you.
Indeed.
It's good to break down the process for people. I think I've got Steve Smith from the Telford team, Site University Challenge here. Over to Steve. Unmute, Steve, if you can.
Hi, David. Good to hear your story, actually. But yeah, we're kind of at the stage now where we're finalising the CIO stuff. And one of the things I noticed is you said when you were talking about your purpose, you talked about just the one purpose, and we seem to have a few purposes. And we've related to the standard purposes that were given in some of the advice from the Charity Commission. Would you say one or multiple purposes would be a good thing to do? Should we just take out all the non-climatey stuff from ours, do you think?
I think it depends on which context you're doing it. I mean, you've obviously got to do it in the context of what you want to actually achieve as your centre and what you want to accomplish. I think the more purposes you have, you're likely to get more questions in terms of they're going to ask about how does this fit in, and then how does this fit in, and then how does this fit in. And so I think you're opening yourself up potentially to questions of that sort of ilk. Are you spreading yourself too thin and that type of thing? If you've got the ability to be able to then address the likely questions about that, then that's fine. We very much focus just on the core environmental side and the education, information, awareness, and then we use that as a which you'll pick up on a little bit later when we've done it. We use that as a catch-all for everything, and that comes to then how you present stuff back to the Charity Commission.
Yeah, so I mean, our thoughts were, I think, along the lines of obviously the environmental one was the key one that was resonant with everyone. Yeah, but there was kind of an element of, you know, helping people who were disadvantaged in some way, and we kind of on the grounds of health and financial, but we focused on the health thing because we think, you know, in our area there's a bunch of people who have got specific sort of mental health issues, and maybe that's been exacerbated around the climate stuff. So we kind of thought that, but we did have some debates about it, didn't we, Jane and Fiona, on that. So yeah, very.
I mean, it was also the thing that, like you say, there's the purpose around environment, but then we've added in the purpose around education, because obviously part of the point of the CEC is to help educate people about the climate crisis, but it's difficult to know whether that can just come under the environment purpose, or we have to put it under education purpose as well, even though we're not providing qualifications, blah, 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 as you would with normal educational things.
What I would say is, if you haven't explicitly identified it as a purpose, it doesn't stop you from doing it. If you have explicitly identified as a purpose, you have to do it. And so what you're doing by putting more purposes in is the Charity Commission will say, well, how are you doing this? And how are you doing this? And how are you doing this? And you've got to be able to demonstrate that. We took the tack of everything should go under the fact that everything's to do with the environment side of things. We're going to do things with disadvantaged people, but we'll do that within the context of delivering out on our environmental purpose, and then having systems in place that are there for disadvantaged people. But that was our tack. It was, if we make it a purpose, then we have to demonstrate to the Charity Commission we have to do it. Whereas if it wasn't an explicit purpose, we can still do it. It's just within the purpose we have put down.
That's really useful, and it makes a whole lot of sense, actually. So I think, Jane and Fiona, we could revisit that and maybe pare it down. I think does that make sense? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, this is why we wanted to talk to you, David.
Okay.
Oh,
Very useful. Thank you.
we're going to come over to Amza, and then I've got a couple of points to put in, and anyone else stick your hand up on the reactions or on your fingers. Amza, Brighton team.
Hello, hi David. So we put in our CIO application about 3 weeks ago, but we didn't include a business plan. So you sent yours in with the application. So do you think we ought to maybe write up a business plan and send, just kind of resubmit, or just hope the application will be approved as it stands?
It's a tricky one. I don't think there's any specific requirement for a business plan in an application. And as you will find out when I go into my second bit, there are pros and cons with having it. It's possible that if you haven't got a business plan or all they've got is your application, they might come back and they might ask you a lot of questions, which essentially results in you then having to almost put a business plan forward. They may explicitly ask for one, I'm not sure. I would err against bringing an application out. And we were once you're in the process, I think you should stick in the process and see what happens, would be my feeling on it. And that was the advice I was given.
Okay, so not to worry too much if they get back to us, just answer the questions and hopefully it'll be fine. I didn't realise you had to complete a business plan alongside it as well. Didn't realise.
They mention it. I don't think it says you have to do one, but I think it suggests that you do one.
Right. Okay.
But what you can do with a business plan is, we found that because of the nature of the questions in the application form, we couldn't express all the things we wanted to do in that, and so the business plan made sense to go alongside it and gave it things like a sense of timescale and where we're going and how we're going to develop and that sort of thing.
Right. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of quick points from me, and I come over to Fiona Telford. So what are they? When dealing with the Charity Commission, keep it simple. Just mention 3 things in your aims and your other things and your activities that they already know about from their list. If you go too much into activism, apparently they don't like the word social justice, although we do. Don't mention XR and protest and that kind of thing. Just say, very clear, this is not an XR project. It's about building an alliance of groups around town. There are many people who've been involved with XR, but also people with transition towns, Friends of the Earth, and solar panel groups, or whatever it is. There is someone within every area. We got helped originally with the Hive Dalston with Hackney Community Voluntary Services. There is a community voluntary service in every area, and there is a special officer there who is a specialist in helping set up legal entities, and they will be your friend and help you. So contact them. I've put what Space Generators used for their charity aims just down on the right there in the chat, but we don't actually mention the environment. I mean, I must admit now, taking me back to the early days, or 4 or 5 years ago, this was set up by others who did a lot of that, and they did do a very simple business plan. Didn't relate to what actually really happened, but so keep it simple. Don't mention activism, go too hard on environment. As you see, Space Generators doesn't actually have environment in there. What we said was we'll go for 3 or 4 simple ones. Later, we'll have trustees meetings and add environmental ones and other ones we want. But to get through the radar of the Charity Commission, keep it really simple. Last one, there was somebody mentioned the Charity Commission thought that XR groups were turning into charities and they didn't understand the nature of that. So please be very careful and keep your wording simple and nothing that's going to flare up. Use all the terms they already understand of their categories. Okay.
Keep it non-political, isn't it, Phoenix?
There is some angles, and I think it's great. You're not allowed to do something very strong party political. You're not supposed to do too much. They did change it a little while ago. You can do politics with a small p, but not politics with a big P or something. And just go in under the radar with them to, you know, keep it simple. And yes, there is stuff you'll have to read up more on doing politics and campaigning and activism. Yeah, politics you've got to be careful over. Okay, over to Fiona Telford.
Yeah, sorry, David, just about the costings. I mean, to what extent are these required, and how many? I know Nadia sent some stuff from Malvern around 3 years of forecasting. I mean, is that kind of what's expected?
We, from our point of view, we felt that the particular numbers weren't, the exact numbers weren't particularly much of an issue, because it's all a bit of guesswork anyway. For me, and having done this with other funding sort of activities, it's demonstrating that you've thought about how are you going to cover your costs and what might they look like as you go along. And if you're going to have a venue of any sort, how are you going to actually, you know, cover the costs of that, whatever they'll be, utilities and things. We'll get the rates relief, but there's other elements that go along with it. So that's very much how we treated it. And I can tell you now that even though the Charity Commission did pick up on a lot of things in our business plan, they didn't make one comment on the financial side of it. So,
yeah, because I wonder if they're not really that interested in the viability of it.
I would have said that would be the issue. I don't think they're that bothered, as long as they look reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
I see a direct point there from Jane Bundy and the Telford team.
Yeah, sorry, my reactions only let me clap or stick my thumb in the air, so I have to keep putting my hand up. Yeah, just on the costings, David, I was trying to get in before Fiona did, because I've got it written down to ask you, but yeah, we wanted to know how far in advance you go, which has been answered. But also in our costings, we've got like you know, like an annual sort of income, but we've also got a startup you know, costings as well. So did you supply that as well?
Yeah, because we were promised some donations at the start, so we knew what we had to go with. So we and that was all just accounted for in the first month. Expenditure was startup costs going in there. So it just went on that basis.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just while you think of any other questions on this bit, and then I know David's got a second bit about responses from the Charity Commission and stuff. Just while you're thinking about that, and if anyone else was thinking about putting a hand up, Trad, I think, has joined us. Would the mystery Trad person like to just say hello and say their name?
Sorry, it's Una. I've got your name.
Great.
I'm just eavesdropping. I'm really happy to see Telford here, because now I'm also trying to start them across Shropshire, right? So yeah, I'll no doubt be in touch with you guys, asking for how you've been going and what my first step should be. I'll let you carry on. I'll just keep eavesdropping.
You've got Oswestry here as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Where are you, Una? Sorry.
I'm in Ludlow. But I was in contact with we've got a South Shropshire climate group and the Zero Carbon Shropshire. So it's kind of, we're trying to cooking a plan to open multiple CECs across Shropshire with multiple teams, but to try and, because it's a charity already and it's got the council support, we're kind of hoping that we could, if we all hit them at the same time, that we might be lucky and have lots open.
Yeah, we're a different council, that's the only thing.
Sorry?
Well, of course, we're a different council.
Yeah, you've got a separate, yeah, but it's still having you close and having you starting the journey will only help us. Sounds like a meetup.
I know Kim, Una. I think I've emailed you before, Una, actually, about something else. So yeah, it's good that you're here, and yeah, we can meet up.
Sounds like it's bubbling in that area. Should we come back to David to do his second bit about response, or yeah, over to David, and then we'll have questions again afterwards, and then we've got a bit of time. We'll go around and see where groups are at, and there's exciting news. Ruth keeps up with the latest of new buildings and groups and things. Very glad to see you, Una. So, like Ruth, another very good organizer. David, over.
Cool. One thing I should have said as well, which comments back to a couple of things that just happened there, was we also elected, we got in touch with the local groups around us, including Farnham for one, and we elected to put our application in as a Waverley wide, which is our borough, charity, so we could provide automatically a charity under which Farnham, Cranley and Hazelmere could just set up centres without having to set up another charity. So we've set ourselves up in that way that we can, in theory, run 4 centres or more across Waverley as we want. And that was something that we felt was very useful to be able to do. And we, Ruth knows that we're talking with Farnham about moving that forward. So that was just on that issue. So we put our submission in on the 4th of May. It says the normal turnover time supposedly for the Charity Commission 6 weeks. It tells you on there when you put it in that you'll probably hear back within about 10 to 12 weeks. So we were anticipating July. We heard nothing by the time we got to July. Got to the beginning of August, we gave them a ring and they said, oh, we're overwhelmed with charity applications and that. But your application, we're currently on applications for the last week of April. You were the first week of May, so I'll be with you soon. We heard nothing then for another 5 weeks. So by mid-September, we'd gone well past any intentions that we thought we'd be in. We'd now got a venue, we were in there, we were doing things, and things had moved on quite a lot of detail, and we got a rates bill. Because obviously we weren't yet a CIO, so we were asked to apply for rates relief as opposed to getting it automatically, which was a bit of a wake-up call. So we rang the Charity Commission up in the middle of September and told them, look, our situation's changed a certain amount, this is going on. They gave me an email to send to say our change of circumstance. And that was a sort of magic little weapon, because then I heard back within 12 hours. I had a response to our, literally I put the phone down at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then by 9 o'clock the next morning, I had a response to our application. So that was good. However, the response came in the form of an extremely long email with a huge number of questions within it, which and a deadline from them of 3 weeks, and a hard deadline in that they said, if you don't respond within this time, your application will be considered ended, etc. So that was a bit of a turnaround after waiting for so long. I read through the questions and sat down for a day and reflected on them and that, because they were quite challenging questions. But the first things that came to mind that were pretty obvious were as follows. First of all, there was no issue with our application in terms of the technical stuff, and that's really important to get right. Make sure all the technical bits that you need to put in are in there, and you've ticked all the boxes and had all those forms filled in, all that sort of stuff. Really important, because until they look at it, that's the point where it's not like they do it in advance and say you haven't got there. They won't look at it until that point. So make sure that's right. The second point was there were absolutely no questions about our application, not one. So in all of the questions we had, they referred to 2 things. Well, actually 3 things. They referred to our business plan. They pulled out lots of issues to do with our business plan and asked us questions about that. Because it had taken so long, we'd actually moved things along. We'd set a website up, it was still in development, and we were starting to think about doing things because we'd started doing a little bit of stuff. So they'd gone through our website in huge detail, and they gave us a whole load of questions about that. And then the other thing that they did, which was sort of inconsistencies in what we were doing and sort of mistakes we'd made, but not sort of conscious mistakes, because it was to do with the thing taking so long and it overlapping into our activity. They also picked up a number of conflicts of interest that hadn't been addressed in our submission, but were now apparent through what was on our website. So that was another area in which they were they picked us up on. So the questions were quite detailed. There was a lot about very specific things. And what they wanted to know was, because we'd cited particular things that we would do in our business plan, they were then onto that in terms of, well, how does this fit in with your purpose? What does it actually mean? So, for example, one of the things that we referred to in our business plan was teaching arts and crafts. So they asked a straightforward question. I've got the responses here that they gave us. So to give you an example of what they said, from your business plan, what is envisaged by teaching arts and crafts, and how does this further the conservation of the environment purpose? So that was specifically that issue, that particular thing we were thinking of doing, and how does it fulfill that purpose? Now, it wasn't, I'm quite happy to I don't think I've put this document up, but I'm quite happy to share this document as well in terms of our responses to the questions. I found those questions pretty easy to deal with. We had lots of ways of demonstrating how arts and crafts and that can support the conservation purpose. There was another one we mentioned about community supported agriculture, from which they seemed to think we were going to run a farm, like a proper farm. And we said, no, we're growing tomatoes on the shelves in there, that type of thing. So there were a number of issues there, but the ones that were really tricky were any that started to overlap with business and any form of trading. So this came up a little bit because obviously we'd indicated that we wanted to make links with local businesses that were involved in doing things that were of ecological and climate orientated benefit. And that was great. So, but the issues there were, are we in any way really just promoting other businesses for them to then go away and make a profit based on the fact that we're running a venue on which we're paying no rates? That was a big concern on that. What were we promoting certain businesses over other businesses? So are we in some way going to say, well, we recommend going to this heat pump manufacturer because they're here and not this one? So there were a lot of questions about that. And again, it's all in the document, which I can share. They were relatively easy to deal with, but they required a lot of thought to go through and explicitly draw the boundaries between what you were doing in support of making people aware of what ecological and environmental and climate mitigating services were around, making samples of things available that we might sell in our venue, but it would be any benefit to the business would be incidental to our intervention. So it would be an accidental consequence of them coming in and asking about heat pumps that someone went and used that particular heat pump manufacturer. So I deployed all my carefully honed skills of writing grants and then answered all those questions obviously pretty well, because we didn't have a comeback. There was almost a trick question, and I had to watch out for this right at the start, because the time scale had been so long. Things had moved on in our thinking, and we had slightly changed our thinking in terms of what we were going to do and how we were going to do it and all this sort of thing. And the first question they asked in their responses were, please clarify whether any of your current proposals have changed, and if so, in what way? When I spoke to Voluntary Action Surrey, they said, under no circumstances indicate that your plans have changed. Because if you did that, there was a possibility that you could be thrown right back to the beginning of the entire process. So I sort of couched our responses in the context of, we have developed and expanded on what we were doing, but we haven't changed anything that we were going to do. And so it was a question of presenting it in the right way. But be really careful with questions like that, because it can put you right back to the start. If your plans have changed, the application's not valid, you'll have to put a new application in. You want to avoid that. And the sense I got from Voluntary Action Surrey was, if it was a small thing, that it's probably not there. But if it was something that could be regarded as being substantial to what you said in your original application, then that was a problem. Now, the biggest issue we had in that area was the fact that we didn't have a venue at the start, and we'd said we weren't going to, we hadn't got a venue even in play when we put the application in, and we were advised by Voluntary Action Surrey not to even mention you'd got one on the go, even though we had, but then we had got a venue. So I had a little exchange about that and just said this was a clarification, and that seemed to be okay. So that level was fine, but a big change could have potentially been a problem. The campaigning and political stuff, they sent a whole load of stuff through reminding us of what our requirements were for campaigning and links with political organizations. They didn't pick up in our application anything that was explicitly a problem in that area, but they insisted that we write a letter back to them signed by all the trustees, telling the Charity Commission that we had read in detail the whole of, I think it's CEC 6, the document that explains all about what you can do politically. And we had to write a letter back to them signed by all the trustees saying we have read and understand this document, and we can assure you that we are going to operate within the guidelines said. So that was how the political stuff came in. They then picked up a load of stuff on our website, which I thought was properly unfair, to be frank, because the website had only just started and we'd cut and paste things from other places, as we all do, and there were a few things that were inconsistent and wrong and were picked up off different things, and it led to a bit of the issues to do with the overlap with trading and with business that came up through that one. I happened to run 2 other companies as well as being involved in this charity, and they'd been through all the company house records, and they knew exactly all my links and all my companies. So one of my companies, Evolve Lead Team, is a training company. And of course, in our application, we talked about running lots of workshops and seminars and all that sort of stuff. So they wanted confirmation that my company wasn't going to be the one that was doing all this training and these workshops. And then I run another business, which is a not-for-profit business called Live Your Values Limited. And again, the same things came up there. What was the linkage here? What was the overlap? Where were the conflicts of interest potentially? Shirley is involved in all of these as well. So for that one, we had to, one, demonstrate there were no linkage, which we could do relatively easily. But then that all had to be written up and signed off by another trustee that wasn't me. And so some other trustee had to take responsibility for all of that. And but that was dealt with fairly well. So that's the political stuff, the trading stuff. I think that's pretty much it in terms of a very quick overview. I've got an entire document here with the questions in it and all my responses to those questions, which I will make sure Ruth has, and she can put it on the documents so you can see a clear example of the questions you get back and then the responses that you do. We put all that back in, we got it back in 5 days before their deadline, and we heard back 2 weeks later with a yes, an affirmative. So there we go, that's the second bit. Questions?
Sorry, thank you very much, David. Absolute gold dust. This is condensed wisdom that we're all sharing with each other on the network. Makes it so much easier for other groups. So we're in the last kind of 10 minutes. So yeah, any questions on that second phase there with David? Fiona and Telford?
Yes, the question is around safeguarding policies, stuff like that. I mean, we're not explicitly saying we're doing stuff with children, but indirectly in the business plan, we're inferring we might work with schools, you know. So did you have to submit any safeguarding stuff yourself, or had you just not even gone down the road of suggesting you'd do any work with children?
We took the same tack. We said we wouldn't do work with children directly. I don't know whether we referred to children in our business plan at all, and I don't think any questions came up about it. In anything we have written down about working with children, the policy is straightforward, which is we don't deal with children by themselves. We only deal with them with a parent and guardian, and in that context, safeguarding is not an issue. As long as you make it clear that that's the only way you interact with children is through with their parents and guardians present, you're fine as far as I'm aware.
Okay. And then the only other thing is just this issue around, obviously we're all in different groups. I'm in Extinction Rebellion. I can't pretend I'm not. Obviously, we've sort of suggested in the business plan, they're one of the groups we might liaise with, but do you think it's just not worth even adding that in? I mean, it's in there with lots of other groups, but
I would just talk about environmental groups generally,
just vaguely,
rather than any explicit groups. Would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Over to Sue in Bath, and then Hamza was just after that on the draw in Brighton. Hamza, fine.
Thank you. I was just following on from that question. So do you obviously have to give the names of the trustees in your application you put in? So did they go and look at all of those like Facebook pages, or do they seem to investigate the trustees?
Well, they certainly investigated me and checked me out with Company House, and that's, I assume they must have checked what the other trustees and if they were involved in businesses. Nothing else came up. I was obviously the only one that looked a bit dodgy. But I assume they would have done, yes. And I think it actually says they will look into things like that on the somewhere in the Charity Commission stuff.
Okay, over to Hamza.
So, I mean, as I said, we've submitted our form and we've met last night and we were having a conversation around looking for buildings. And it sounds like you managed to get a building before you got your charity status. Is that right? So was it easy then approaching letting agents or whoever to say, we're in the process of getting charity status, and can we look at buildings? Can we have those conversations? Was that fairly a straightforward thing then?
I'm gonna disappoint you here, Hamza, because we already had a building, because Shirley and I were already running the building we're in for other purposes, and it was repurposed. So we were sort of boxing clever by not letting on too early on that we already had something ready to go, because we were advised to do that because it would be more complicated. In the end, we ended up having to say we've got the building anyway. But in terms of finding the building, I can't be much help to you on that, because we just had one essentially ready to go.
Can anyone else just give us a bit of advice on that? Shall we go out there? Because that was one of the conversation points, is start looking for buildings, or do we need to wait until we've got our charity status so it's easier?
I would say start looking, because you can get the group excited when you spot that big empty Debenhams in the middle of Swindon, like it got Swindon very excited, and they got quite organised quite early on. But basically, in the short term, we're talking about CIOs today, but to take on a building, it's a lot quicker to set up a community interest company. Ticking the not-for-profit box can be set up within less than a week. For like 30, 40 quid or whatever. So if you find the right building and the council says, yes, we're going to give it to you within a month or two, then, set up a community interest company, do that within the month, and then, start the charity process in parallel, and that will come through in 3 months.
Fantastic.
But get excited by the beautiful building. Just do an exercise. Imagine if we did get our ideal building, what would we fill it with, and get the group excited, and then.
Well, there's loads of empty buildings in Brighton and loads of really good ones. So we're all quite excited, and we know that's when all that energy from everyone will come on board, because we've got a building. Can I ask another quick question? Website. We haven't got a website. So David, you said is it worthwhile us quickly getting up a website if they're going to do research on us? So we've got something else besides a Facebook page.
It was a double-edged sword, because of course it raised a lot of questions. We got our website up because we were starting to do stuff, and so we needed it because we were doing stuff. We didn't do it to satisfy the Charity Commission. We weren't anticipating they would even look at it. We set it up because it took them so long to get us back, and then when it was set up, they went and checked it out. So they will check out. If you've got a Facebook group, they will go and look at that. If you've got a website, they will go and look at that, and they might ask you questions about that. I would just make sure that if you're doing a website, just be aware of what you're putting on it, because they might ask you questions about it. We were just a bit slack by not, being on top of the fact that they might look at it, and it led to some questions, which we dealt with, and it wasn't a problem. But I was surprised, and so I would say, just be aware of it.
I'm going to go over to Stephen, but just technical question. The group, is the group happy to continue for 5 more minutes to 8:05? Yeah. Everyone okay with 8:05? I'm just going to push it on the university challenge. Are people all right with 8:10? 8:10? Yeah. All right. Okay. So we'll go to 10 past and do some quick few word checkouts. So over to Steve in the time traveling.
Mine's just a really quick one. So if I've just become the secretary of the local Green Party, that wouldn't be a problem from an investigation point of view.
That's an interesting one, Steve. I was asked to be the chairman of our local, the chairperson of our local Green Party. And when I looked at the job title, it talked about actually making public statements about the Green Party in that role. And because I'm the chair of our charity, I felt that could easily end up being a potential misunderstanding or a miscommunication. I could be seen in one role and then in another. So I elected not to do that. I don't know whether I felt it could potentially cause problems, and I didn't want to be in that position. So I stepped back from that in that context. So I don't think there's anything explicitly, there's nothing that says you can't be in a charity and be in a political party. It's a question of keeping the two roles clearly separate. And that was my concern. I felt it might be difficult to keep them completely separate, and so I elected not to do it.
I think if you're a chair, then that's one thing, because you are a spokesperson. I'm not planning to be a spokesperson. I'm just there to support the party, really, is kind of what my role is. So I'm probably okay with that then.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything, a problem in that context. I'm planning to stand as a councillor at the next elections anyway, so I don't think there's any issue with that, but it's about keeping them separate.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Go over to Debs and Sunny Preston.
Debs.
I'm just thinking, I'm worried about my Facebook. Because I share XR stuff all the time, and yeah,
that's not a problem, because you could be a member. I'm a member of XR, and I've got XR stuff all over mine. They'll have looked at that.
Right.
But so you can be in XR, and you can be in a CEC and be in the Green Party and all these other sorts of things. So I wouldn't worry about that. They didn't pick up on me or any. I think all of our trustees are in XR. So
right, all right, thank you.
Okay, but just please be aware that, you know, this is not specifically an XR project. It's an alliance building project, and many different groups from all over your town. And it's amazed me, from Bath, how many turned up to the Zoom meet, to Swindon, how big their alliance is, in Guildford. You know, you've got Guildford Surrey Wildlife Trust in there, and biodiversity groups, and Surrey University showing people pollution monitors, and people who work on bicycle campaigns. So, and they've got an activism corner with Greenpeace, XR, Amnesty International, and Youth Strike for Climate. But just please, when you get these buildings, don't put a massive, great big XR banner straight in the window in the first week. Just build things up, get them to love you for all the great community work you're doing. And obviously it's your legal right in, you know, to be able to do peaceful protests, and there will be some meetings and chats and painting banners and things by many different groups, whether that's Transition Towns, Greenpeace, XR, Friends of the Earth, or the local, you know, jam making group or knitting group, or whatever these things is. Okay, so we're on 2 minutes past. We've got about 8 minutes groups. So any more final questions, or we'll go to checkouts and we'll have a little bit of music at the end. There is loads of great news from around the network. Maybe
we've got Jane from Telford.
Jane, direct, yeah. Maybe any other questions or anything from your area? Succinct, please, people, for the last 8 minutes of, yeah. There's some exciting news places. Ruth might be able to share. Yes, Jane, over.
Yeah, it's not a direct point, but I was just trying to get your attention. Yeah, other groups are available, is the answer, isn't it? Just a quick question, David. It's sort of not sort of something we've touched on really, but as we're going to have like members of the public into the building, etc., do you have to have first aid trained people on the premises at all times, one person? And do you need to have DBS checks?
Well, with the DBS side of things, that's only if you're explicitly going to have children on there that are unaccompanied, and therefore you'll need to be DBS checked for that. If they're going to be there with their parents and guardians, you're fine. There's no problem in that thing. With first aid training, I don't think there's any legal requirement that you have to have people that are first aid trained. Obviously, you will need, when you've got a building set up, you'll need a health and safety policy and a way of going about it. So there's that.
A first aid cabinet or something.
Yeah, be very careful with having your own first aid cabinet. Because if you haven't got somebody who's first aid trained, and they apply first aid, that can be in contravention of your insurance. So you've got to be careful on that.
Okay. Right. Okay. So I know it's sort of for children, but what about sort of vulnerable people? You can't predict who's going to walk through your door, can you?
So same issue would apply for that. Any vulnerable person would have to be accompanied and that sort of thing. Clearly, if a vulnerable person came in and they weren't accompanied and they were in your space, you would have to make a judgment as to how to approach that. Maybe find out where they're from and contact that place and see what support is available for this person if they do need to be accompanied and supported. So I think that's a sort of case by case basis. We've had the same questions come up with us as well, and I think be pragmatic, but be careful as well in terms of thinking about what you've got to do to support that individual in your space.
Okay, thank you.
Just to let you know that if you're a charity, you can get DBS checks done for free.
Okay. Over to Ruth just for a little bit. Ruth keeps a much better tab than I get very busy with Ilford and around, but there's some new groups setting up around the network and new buildings being given. Is there any 2 or 3 new ones or stuff? Anything you want to?
Yeah, no, we've got sort of possibly 3 new buildings are coming up before the end of the year. We're sort of right at the moment. So Kingston have got a building that they're hoping to get in before Christmas, and we've just been joined by Woking, who are looking to get a building in the next couple of weeks, but they've got a lot of council support. They're sort of already a big strong alliance of groups. And we have news from Wandsworth, and Suzanne is here who can share that news.
Yes, Suzanne.
Hello. Yes, the art exhibition is now over. I'm very sorry. It was great. I loved your meeting. Sorry I couldn't listen to all of it. Sorry, I'm present now. Yeah, the news is I have teamed up with Crew Energy, which is a local to Wandsworth and Merton initiative that brings green energy advice to residents about heat pumps and solar panels. And they've been popping up all over the place in libraries, but have found the difficulty that they have no home. And I was told that he had some money for rent and that he had to spend it in about a fortnight's time. I got in touch with my local shopping centre, which has a charity group called Rainbow Rising. And that's a name to write down if you want to contact Rainbow Rising, and they operate in your town. Then basically they take units out of shopping centres and repurpose them, and it's rent free, as I understand. So yeah, we should be getting a choice of a unit pretty much before Christmas and getting a little thing operating in there. It's so exciting.
Brilliant. That's really amazing, Suzanne. Thanks for your on the Telegram. It is linked